Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Souder Woodworking, America's furniture craftsman. With more than 50 years' experience, Souder provides ready-to-assemble furniture for today's home and office. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles. By Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees, chef quality you can count on.
Hello and welcome to Heartland Cooking. Have you ever heard the expression, putting food by? It's an old colloquial term for preserving. And this includes canning, freezing, pickling, and that would also include kraut making, as well as drying. It's simply food preservation, no matter what you call it. Today I'm going to show you how to do a few preserving recipes. The ones we're going to do today are not your basic items such as tomatoes and peaches. Instead, the recipes are special ones. One is weird and two are elegant. All, however, could be used as gifts and served at your own table for special occasions. I will begin with the weird recipe first, corn cob jelly. Now, please do not think I have become unhinged and slightly dotty. This is a legitimate recipe, and I must tell you, I have had requests for it. And there's no question in my mind that this recipe, as odd as it is, should be recorded, for it's part of America's pioneer history. And for those of you who are regular watchers, you will be relieved to know that we did indeed find the elusive corn cobs, so we're able to do this recipe after all. It's destined to be a winner, or at least a conversation piece. The first thing you need is 12 dried red corn cobs. This is field corn. Popcorn would be white. Popcorn cobs, rather, would be white. I'll tell you more about where you can get the corn cobs later on. Now, you want to simmer these corn cobs covered with water with a lid on for 30 minutes. The corn cobs are going to absorb part of the water. And this is what they look like after they have been simmering. Delicious, right? Yum, yum. Now, you want to strain this whole mixture through a sieve that's been lined with cheesecloth. The cheesecloth is important because it gets all the residue out, and you certainly don't want any whole corn cobs in this jelly. Now, these corn cobs certainly are not needed anymore, so dispose of them. Throw them in the garbage, or even better, put them in your compost bed. And for goodness sake, do not, hear me right, do not put them down your garbage disposal. You'll have problems that you can't believe. Now, transfer this juice to a medium saucepan and then simmer it uncovered for 45 minutes to 1 hour. You want to reduce the sauce to 3 cups. I really wouldn't call this a sauce, yes. Let's call it juice. And this is what it looks like after it has been reduced to 3 cups. Now, our corn cobs were pretty intensely red today, so we're having a really intense colored jelly. The shade of the finished jelly will depend entirely on your corn cobs and how old they might be, or whether you've used the white popcorn cobs. Now, to this, and turn your burner onto high. To this, we're going to add 1 box of powdered pectin. And this is the thickener for jams and jellies. And 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And you want to bring this to a full rolling boil that you cannot stir down. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about corn cobs while that comes to a full rolling boil. I think I'll put the lid on. Now, I get mine at a grain elevator, and I would suggest that you call a grain elevator in your nearest small town. Now, ordinarily, cobs are sold by the ton for smoking meats and for kindling and for mulch. This is a great garden mulch when they're chopped up. Now, if you explain to the owners that you're making corn cob jelly, be prepared for incredulity. First, a few people come in and ask for only 12 cobs. Secondly, corn cob jelly isn't exactly common, but persevere. Now, this is not coming to a rolling boil, but it's getting there. And then we're going to add some sugar. And I'll tell you more about these corn cobs. It's worth the time, and you could find them also at what I would call a pet food store where you buy bird food, because you can buy corn on the cob, dried corn on the cob there for your cardinals and your blue jays. They especially like it. And then you can shell your own while you watch television. My show, of course. And then you have your corn cobs and feed the corn to the birds. You've done the work for them. So that's an alternative thing. You should not use the corn cobs off of your bird feeder. Start with fresh ones. Now we're ready to add the 3 cups of sugar. And again, bring this to a full rolling boil and let it boil for a minute longer. And you want this sugar thoroughly dissolved or you'll have grainy jelly. But once it comes to a full rolling boil, it'll be dissolved, not to worry about that. There we are. Now at this point also I might add, you might want to add a little bit of red food coloring to tint this jelly a deeper pink. And I think I would like that because it's just a little flat colored. It's sort of like that rhubarb that we've talked about earlier. You should tint rhubarb, you should tint corn cob jelly. Now, if you've used the popcorn cobs, they'll be white, and you can tint the jelly yellow. This is going to be very pretty, actually. You know, utilizing corn cobs was just another way that country women made do with what they had. There certainly wasn't much money to buy fruit in those days, and orchards could take years to bear fruit. So corn cobs were yet another readily available ingredient to use in cooking. They also used these as mattress stuffing. Well, you know, we have beanbag chairs. Why not mattress stuffing made of corn cobs? Now, let me give you some reasons that your jams might be soft or runny, things that you write me about. First of all, overcooking lowers the jellying capacity of the pectin, and incorrect proportions of sugar and juice also are a factor. It's very important to follow the proportions given to you in your recipes. And you always find recipes in these boxes. Read them. And there might be insufficient acid in the fruit or berries. Lemon juice sometimes is added when fruit is acid deficient. Goodness knows this is. Now, you can make too large of a batch of jam and jelly too, and that goofs things up. So limit each batch to 4 to 6 cups of fruit. Now you're going to want to pour this into sterilized jars, and I've got some precious ones here. These are new on the market. I love their shapes. Some of these make cute little party gifts or stocking stuffers. I think they're extremely decorative. Now these would be sterilized, and then we are going to pour out the jelly into these jars. And this has come to our full rolling boil. I don't think it rolled for a minute, but we're going to have to move on. And pour this into the jar, leaving 1/4 inch of the what they call head space at the top of the jar, because you don't want too much air space. We're right up there to the top, 1/4 inch. There we are. These funnels are, it's imperative that you have a funnel. Be sure to get one. Now I find these things at the hardware, and they work beautifully. Then, with a cloth, wipe off the lip of the jar, because if there's any food or any liquid on here, the seal will not take. And then put on a sterilized lid. This has been boiled in hot water, and seal it and process it in a hot water bath. And store it, cool it, and store it in a dark place after it comes out of the bath. Now, I'm not even going to tell you how long to do that, because I must tell you the rules on canning changes practically as I speak. The FDA watches this very closely for your safety, just as they should. So I'm going to recommend 2 canning books to you that are ideal and that you should have in your library of cookbooks. This one's called Putting Food By. It would be available in any bookstore, or you can order it. This one is called the Blue Book, and it's put out by Ball. And it's available through the Ball Corporation in Muncie, Indiana. Or call your county extension agent. Those people exist to help people like us, and they can answer any question that we have about canning. Now this jelly, and we made this with the popcorn cobs, it has a very pleasing but subtle flavor. So eat it on hot biscuits or toasted white bread. You're in for a treat. Now our next recipe is a very old one, and it would fall into the condiment classification. It's called fruit chili sauce. Now, country cooks at the end of a growing season, and faced with baskets of this and baskets of that to use up on their back porch, would create the most interesting combinations from the rich bounty of their gardens and orchards. And I remember my grandmother did that, and she never used a recipe. She just put things in and tasted and made fabulous things, like this fruit chili sauce. And fruit chili sauce is traditionally served as an accompaniment to chicken and red meat dishes. Now we're just going to do half a recipe today, and it will yield about 5 pints of sauce. You'll need to mix several ingredients, so listen carefully or get a pencil and paper. But remember, I'm just doing a half a recipe. Now in a very deep bowl, I want you to combine 15 tomatoes that have been peeled and chopped. You don't have to seed them. Take out the core. And I think I'm going to have trouble getting all this in, so I may not add them all. As usual, it seems like my pots are not big enough or my recipes are too big. I'm sure going to take care of that next time. I'm going to bring my turkey roaster. Let's get serious. Now, we're going to add this beautiful assortment of vegetables. 3 medium onions that have been chopped, 3 peaches that have been chopped. Doesn't it sound good? It's unexpected, isn't it? And then we're going to have 3 medium pears that have been chopped and 1 1/2 cup apples. Now, you can see what we're going to have here, this very subtle chili sauce, not exactly sharp as a tomato chili sauce would be. And then we're going to add other things. 2 cups of sugar and 1 cup of cider vinegar and a tablespoon of grated lemon rind. And look at these spices and write them down carefully. 1 teaspoon of ginger, cinnamon, and allspice. 1/2 tablespoon of salt and celery seed. And 1/2 teaspoon of mustard seed and pepper. And add that to the pot and give this a good stir. And then we're going to transfer it to the stove, bring it to a boil, lower the heat, and cook it uncovered until the mixture is nice and thick, like this. It should look like chili sauce. And this will take you anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. And the amount of time depends totally on the size of your pan. This might take a little longer. This is a little dinky little pan. Or the amount of rainfall we've had this year and how juicy your tomatoes and fruit are. Stir it frequently so it doesn't burn. Now, pour this mixture into hot pint jars and leave 1/8 of an inch of headspace at the top. And process it in a hot water bath according to the most current instructions for chili sauce that was given in one of those recommended books. Now, this fruit chili sauce is one of those old concoctions that's a real treasure. It's the only printed recipe I've ever seen for it, I mean in my cookbook, and it certainly is a most intriguing meat accompaniment. Don't you think it's pretty? It tastes as good as it looks. Now, we've used a lot of fruit in our Midwestern chili sauce today because the Midwest is really a great orchard area. We're blessed. The one fruit we didn't use, however, you probably noticed, was the cherry. It would have been a bit too chewy for the sauce, I think. Cherries remain one of the Midwest's most popular fruits, however, and the greatest cherry-producing area in the United States is in the northwest corner of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, close to Petoskey. That's a wonderful town. I love it. There, protected by Lake Michigan breezes, some of the world's most beautiful orchards thrive because of the warmer temperatures occurring around the Great Lakes. If you could possibly be there in the spring and see those white clouds of orchards, it's just a sight you shan't forget. This unique region is really most famous for its tart, red Montmorency cherry. They're also known as sour or pie cherries. Makes your mouth water. And Petoskey has earned the title of cherry capital of the world. A relatively new cherry product that's coming out of Michigan now is the dried cherry, and it's taken the food world by storm. And one of the earliest suppliers of this new product is Justin Rashid at American Spoon Foods in Petoskey. Now, Justin gleans the best of Michigan foodstuffs, both wild and homegrown, and he creates condiments, jams, and jellies, and other gourmet items that are unbelievably good, and they're the essence of summer in the Midwest. The company's grown from a real little operation to a bigger one, but the small kitchen quality of his goods remain unchanged.
It is the careful individual attention at American Spoon Foods that gives their products their exquisite flavor and quality. Red raspberry preserves are being made here and are cooked in 3 stages. After cleaning and layering with a touch of sugar, the juice is then separated from the berries. The juice is reduced over open gas flames in copper pots to cook off the excess water in order to get the full flavor of the raspberries. Then the juice is cooked down and the special scraping paddles keep it moving. That surely beats stirring it by hand, doesn't it? Using copper kettles for cooking gives the preserves a subtle caramelized flavor, an almost baked flavor, like homemade jams have. Then the berries are added and the mixture continues to cook. Justin recommends using the earliest ripened fruit, for it has a higher amount of natural pectin. They never use artificial pectin in any of their products. Close to the end of the cooking time, a bit of the preserves is dropped from a wooden spoon, and that's where the name American Spoon Foods comes from, onto a refractometer to see if the proper jam consistency is reached. Once the jam is finished, the machine is stopped. All of the machines are stopped, actually, and the paddles are scraped clean. Then the preserves are immediately transferred to an agitating machine that keeps the juice and the fruit equally mixed as it's transferred to the jars. That's a lot of jam right there, isn't it? And they scrape out every last berry. Won't this be good on English muffins or toast? The equivalent of 1/2 pound of fruit, or 10 ounces, goes into each 8-ounce jar. During the summer season, they process 3,000 jars a day from those 5 copper kettles. And I might add, these are 10-hour days. For when the fruit is ripe, it has to be taken care of right then and there. Strawberries are processed in June, followed by red and black raspberries, then gooseberries, peaches, apricots, pears, and all sorts of conserves and honeys. Fruit butters and fruit ketchups have recently been introduced to the line. This small one-man operation that started in 1987 now sells its products in over 400 stores across the country as more and more people want jams, jellies, and condiments like Mother used to make. And as you might guess, they have a successful mail order business.
I certainly found the process interesting, Justin, and now here we are in your store with everything so beautifully shining with the sunlight coming in on it. Tell me how you got started with American Spoon Foods and the philosophy that went into it.
Well, I suppose we really got started at the point in which I met Chef Larry Forgione in New York City. A friend introduced us, and I began as a wild food forager, actually harvesting wild berries and vegetables and wild mushrooms that we supplied to his restaurant. Mm-hmm. Later, Larry came out to Michigan, and we took on the goal of making the finest preserves in America from Michigan fruits.
Well, you've succeeded, obviously. Now, you ship all over the world, do you not?
Yes, we do. We ship gifts all over the world. We ship our products to stores all over the United States and to mail order customers.
Now, some of the items are very old-fashioned. I noticed you have like a pear preserve and a thimbleberry jam and several kinds of fruit butters. There must be a real demand for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think people remember having these things as children, but I don't think in our world today people have time to make them for themselves. Mm-hmm. We try to do that for people, make those things that they no longer have time to make for themselves.
Well, they're made in very small batches, and I think that's one reason they're so delicious.
Yeah, batch size is critical because you don't want to expose the fruit to too much heat for too long a time. Mm-hmm. And so that limits and maintains the quality.
Now, tell me what else you have besides the canned preserved things.
Well, our dried berries are very famous. Of course, we have dried wild blueberries and dried cranberries, but I suppose most famous of all are our dried red tart Montmorency cherries. They're little ruby red nuggets of cherry, and people eat them just as they are and use them as an ingredient in all kinds of recipes where they would use raisins. So red tart cherries are becoming very famous.
Well, thank you so much for showing us the operation today. We just enjoyed it immensely.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed showing you.
One of the recipes using dried cherries that was developed by American Spoon Foods is a marvelous holiday stuffing, and it makes enough for an 18-pound turkey. That's another whole show. You can do it other ways, though. You can bake it in a casserole and serve it as a side dish with duck, goose, chicken, or pork. And we have some dried cherries here. Aren't they pretty? They're a deep red. They sort of look like a big flat raisin, only they have this reddish undertone. They're good in granola or in cookies or muffins. They're really a lovely thing to have on hand. You can use them in lots of ways. And we begin this recipe by soaking 6 ounces of cherries in 1 cup of Madeira for several hours or overnight. Now, Madeira is a wine that runs from quite dry to very sweet. And the one I'm using today is a medium variety from Ohio, and it's very similar in taste to sherry. Now, you want to drain these cherries and set them aside and save the Madeira, because we're going to use that later on. Then, in a large bowl, combine 14 slices of day-old bread. Now, I want you to use a good quality of bread here, not that soft, punky stuff, but a good quality, fine textured bread. 14 slices, and cut it up in cubes. And then to this, we're going to add 1 1/2 cups of toasted pecans. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. And then we're going to add the macerated cherries. And then, in a fry pan, saute a 1/2 cup of butter with 1 cup of chopped onion and 1 cup of finely chopped celery and a 1/2 cup of finely chopped shallots. And cook these for about 10 minutes until they're nicely softened. And then add this to the bread mixture. Getting better all the time, isn't it? Then you want to add 3 cups of apples that have been peeled and coarsely chopped, and then a 1/2 cup of golden raisins and a 1/2 cup of parsley. Hope you're writing all this down, but it isn't complicated at all. And 2 teaspoons of dried tarragon, a teaspoon of thyme, a wonderful herb for stuffings, and a teaspoon of pepper and a teaspoon of salt, and then 10 or 12 crumbled sage leaves. And do this by hand because it'll be a little fresher. Now, then toss in this reserved Madeira. It's a rather dry, crumbly dressing, but that's all right. The juices from the apples will moisten this all up. Then toss this very well together, and I'm going to have to speed through as usual because I want to show you a way that you can use this. I'm going to use my hands. Now, you would stuff your 18-pound turkey as usual, or you could stuff a large capon, a couple of large capons with this. But what I'm going to show you how to do is to stuff a pork chop. Now, order from your butcher double cut pork loin chops and have him put a pocket in them like this, a nice deep one, because you want to get as much stuffing in there as you can possibly get. And then put in some of this wonderful aromatic stuffing. And if it comes out a little bit, that's all right, because it'll give some flavor to the drippings. Now put this in a skillet, and you can do as many as you want at a time. This would make a lot of pork chops, probably 24 actually. Put this in a skillet and splash on some wine, maybe a 1/2 cup for 4 chops, and maybe some broth if you don't want to use wine. And then bake that at 325 degrees, covered for 1 hour. And then uncover it and bake it for 15 minutes longer until it's nice and tender and browned. And you might even want to turn up the broiler a little bit. And here's what it looks like when it's all done. Isn't that just absolutely marvelous? And we're serving it today with some fresh asparagus and some jellied aspic. This is not corn cob jelly. Now, another little statistic that I want to toss out to you about the Montmorency cherries is it takes to make 1 pound of cherries dried, it takes 8 pounds of the fresh ones. And that is a lot of cherries. And so that explains a little bit why they're so costly, but they're well worth it. Now, this dressing is a real harmonious combination of bread, fruits, and wine, and herbs, as you can see. It's a treasure of a recipe, and I really recommend it. Now, today I've presented you with some really unusual dishes. The rather whimsical corn cob jelly, which is nonetheless part of America's pioneer past, and the extraordinarily good fruit chili sauce, an outstanding condiment to be made at the end of the growing season with the glories from your garden or from the farmer's market. And finally, the holiday stuffing, a revised classic with dried cherries and a splash of Madeira. It's a good stuffing for most meats and fowl. With so many people preserving food by canning throughout the years, it's no wonder that we have a lot of equipment around in flea markets and in stores. The enthusiasm for canning has never abated. Many of the things haven't changed a whole lot either, and some are really considered collectibles, and they're snatched up eagerly. Today we have a nice assortment of things. This blue quart jar has a bale top. Wire closures were used to keep the lid in place after applying the rubber ring. This jar was made by the Lightning Company. I'd not heard of them before. The jar with the zinc lid was manufactured later and was a much, much safer way to preserve food because the seal was airtight. The jar was made by Ball, but it was also called a mason jar after the originator of the screw-top canning jar. And I'm telling you, Mason certainly changed the food world when people would start canning at home. This small blue pint jar says ideal on the side, and it was patented on July 14th, 1908. The fact that it's dated makes it a little more valuable. And this spoon is called a skeleton spoon, and it was used often in canning. Isn't that shape interesting? It looks like a rib cage. Sort of a sick rib cage, but a rib cage nonetheless. The granite sieve is certainly an olding, with a pan underneath to catch the drippings. And look at this old granite funnel. It has a really unusual shape. And I simply love the jar lifter. It's so graceful with its wooden handles, it could pass almost as folk art. And it was used to take the jars in and out of the hot water bath. You'll still need a jar lifter, old or new, if you're going to can very much. So until next time, essa gut, eat good.
Major funding for Marcia Adams Heartland Cooking is provided by Souder Woodworking, producers of ready-to-assemble furniture for the home and office, America's furniture craftsmen with more than a half-century of experience. By Marilat Industries, America's cabinet maker, committed to quality in a variety of kitchen and bath cabinetry styles. By Maple Leaf Farms, a symbol for ducklings and frozen entrees, chef quality you can count on.